Today at Speedy's Garage, we're going to be installing a radiator overflow reservoir that's been custom painted by my buddy Joe Agent at Agent Automotive. It looks fantastic. It is color matched Hemi orange to match the car. For this modification, you're going to need whatever it takes to get your air box or cold air intake off, needle nose pliers, some locking vice grips, one of your better half's Pyrex containers, but don't tell her you're using it. Same thing with the baster. Possibly some Mopar antifreeze. This is to get my cold air intake off, so that's what that's for. The flathead screwdriver, and then the 10mm, the little extension on it for the two 10mm bolts that hold the stock reservoir in place. After I installed the custom 392 wiring harness covers, the coolant overflow reservoir just really stood out like a sore thumb. And since it was cheap and easy to swap out for a painted one, that's what I'm going to do. I was lucky enough to have a friend give me one of these at Challenger Fest 5 this year, so I didn't have to remove my stock overflow reservoir, paint it, and put it back in. I could actually work on this one while the stock one's still in the car, so that's what I did. However, they're pretty cheap from the dealer, under 40 bucks I believe, so it might make sense just to buy one and have it painted before you start working on the car. I'm going to start by getting the cold air intake out of the way. Next, I'm using the turkey baster and the container to draw out as much of the radiator fluid from the reservoir as I can. Obviously, I want to try to do this without making a big mess, and this is step one of being successful with that. So I got about 40 ounces of coolant out of the reservoir, and that's how much is left in it. So now I'm going to remove the power steering reservoir and the two 10mm bolts that hold the coolant reservoir to the car. I'm going to cap off this hose. There shouldn't be anything left in it because it's just the return, and this reservoir area is empty, but there's another larger hose on the bottom of the coolant reservoir I'm going to have to contend with. The power steering reservoir is just held on by a little plastic tab on the side of the coolant reservoir. So once you pull the reservoir back, you can expose the lower hose. It's about 1 inch in diameter. Go ahead and remove the hose clamp, and then I put a rag around the hose before I put the vice grips on it to pinch it closed. I didn't want to take a chance on damaging that hose. Now I'm just going to slide the reservoir off and keep a rag handy to catch any fluid that might leak out. So there's the factory reservoir removed. I did plug the top hole with another rag, and as I pulled it out, I just put my finger over this port at the bottom, and then I poured any remaining fluid out of it into these containers so that I can easily get it back in the new reservoir. So I've got the new reservoir in, the lower hose is connected. I'm going to go ahead and slide the hose clamp back over. Now I can remove vice grips. Check the hose, make sure it's not damaged and back to regular shape. Now we can finish the install. I'm going to start by getting it lined up and reinstalling the two 10mm bolts. I'm not going to tighten them all the way. I'm just doing this to get the reservoir held in place. Do them snug for now. Now I'm going to connect the rear hose. Now we want to pour the coolant we captured back into the reservoir, and keep an eye out for any chunks of sediment or anything. You want to try not to put the dirty stuff, or at least the big pieces, back into your new reservoir. I found a couple I just fished out And then I'm going to stop pouring a little bit from the bottom to keep the majority of it out of this new one. And here's why you need to leave a little sight window in your paint. So when you're filling it back up, you can see the level of the coolant. And since mine's real close, I'm only about a 1/4 inch from the max line cold, it's technically fine, but I'm going to top it up with some distilled water. And I'm going to call that good. Now reinstall your cold air intake or your air box, whatever the case may be. Being careful, obviously, not to scratch your new coolant reservoir. Now when I'm reinstalling my hose clamps, you guys know I'm OCD, so I like to put the clamp exactly back where it was. It'll leave a little notch in the rubber so you can see it. And then I like for the screw heads to all line up as well. Any of them that can be seen. To me, it just shows attention to detail and quality of work. And there it is installed. It really improves the looks of the engine bay a lot. Not much time involved, and it's very easy to do. If you're careful like I was, you won't even need any antifreeze. It really finishes off the engine bay. And now just fire up the car and check for leaks. I don't think you'll have any issues with having to burp the new reservoir. Since we pinched off that lower hose, it shouldn't have gotten any air bubbles or anything into the actual cooling system, but keep an eye on it just the same. So that's it for today. If you'd like to see some more project information, visit my website, www.speedysgarage.net, and thanks to Joe Agent for the fantastic paint job, www.agentautomotive.com.